I spent a long time thinking that staying quiet was the same thing as being strong. I thought that if I didn't react, if I didn't raise my voice or start an argument, I was showing a kind of maturity that other people lacked. It felt safe. It felt like I was the bigger person. But eventually, you realize that there is a difference between choosing peace and simply being afraid to make waves. I was at a dinner party last Friday when that realization finally hit me like a physical weight. The room was loud, filled with people who knew how to command attention, and I was just sitting there, existing on the periphery. It was a comfortable spot usually until the conversation drifted toward me and the person I was with, Lena. We had been together for 3 years, and for most of that time, I felt like we were a team. But that night, the dynamics shifted. A guy named Elliot, someone I barely knew but who thrived on the sound of his own voice, started picking apart my life. It started as a joke, something about my career path, but then it got personal. He started making comments about my personality, about how I was too reserved, too passive, almost like I wasn't really present in my own life. Everyone laughed. Lena laughed too. That was the moment I stopped looking at the floor. I looked at the people around the table. They were all waiting for my reaction. I think they expected me to get defensive, or maybe to leave the room in a huff, or even to try and joke my way out of it. People love a spectacle. They love to see how much you can take before you finally break. But I didn't feel broken. In fact, for the first time in a long time, I felt incredibly clear. I watched Elliot drink his wine, his confidence radiating in that arrogant way that only comes from people who think they have nothing to lose. He thought he was the smartest person in the room because he was the loudest. He hadn't realized that the quietest person is often the one observing everything, filing it away, noting every detail that everyone else ignores. Lena was watching me now. Her smile had faded a little bit, maybe because she sensed that something about the air in the room had changed. She had grown accustomed to the version of me that just let things slide. She had become comfortable with the idea that I was someone who wouldn't hold her accountable for her own loyalty or lack thereof. It's a dangerous thing when someone you love gets used to your silence. They start to mistake your restraint for indifference, and that is where the erosion of respect begins. It doesn't happen in one massive explosion. It happens in the quiet moments when someone says something cruel and you smile instead of correcting them. It happens when you are left out of a decision and you say nothing. It happens when you are made the punchline of a joke and you go along with it just to keep the peace. I put my drink down. It wasn't a loud gesture, but the sound of the glass hitting the wooden tables seemed to stop the conversation anyway. I looked directly at Elliot. I didn't glare, and I didn't raise my voice. I just leaned back and waited until he felt the weight of my attention. He faltered, the smirk slipping off his face as he realized I wasn't going to play his game. I asked him a simple question, something about why he felt the need to project his own insecurities onto people he didn't even know. The room went dead silent. It was a surgical kind of quiet. I pointed out that his constant need for validation was a mask for someone who was terrified of being irrelevant. I didn't attack him, I just held up a mirror to his behavior. He tried to interrupt, but he didn't have the footing. He was used to victims who ran away, not someone who stood their ground with absolute, unwavering calm. I told him that respect isn't something you command by taking it from others, it's something you earn by being a person of integrity. He had nothing left to say. The bravado he had built up all night evaporated, and he looked smaller than I had ever seen him. It wasn't about winning a fight. It was about defining the terms of my own existence. After that, I stood up and motioned for Lena to step aside with me. She followed, her expression caught between confusion and something that looked a lot like awe. We walked toward the patio, away from the noise, away from the judgment of the room. People were still talking, but the focus had shifted. They weren't looking at Elliot anymore, they were looking at me. They saw that the quiet guy was still quiet, but he was no longer invisible. There is a profound difference between the two states of being. I wasn't doing this to prove anything to them, but for the first time, I was acting entirely for myself. Lena stopped near the patio door, looking at me as if she were seeing me for the very first time in our 4 years together. She was searching for the person she thought she knew, the one who stayed silent, the one who kept the peace, and she couldn't find him. That was a terrifying realization for her, but a liberating one for me. I told her that respect doesn't break all at once. It erodes little by little in the small concessions we make every single day. I told her that by allowing that kind of talk to happen around us, she had participated in that erosion. She started to cry, not out of performative guilt, but because she finally understood the cost of her own choices. We had spent so much time being steady, which is just a polite word for stagnant. We had reached a point where the silence between us wasn't built on trust, but on the fear of what might happen if we actually said what we were thinking. She asked me what she should do, and I told her that the first step was learning the difference between loudness and strength. Strength isn't about being the one who shouts the loudest. It's about being the one who refuses to be moved from their own truth. I didn't hold it over her. I didn't scold her. I just invited her into a reality where we were both responsible for how we treated each other and how we allowed others to treat us. It was a heavy conversation, but it was necessary. For the first time, I felt like we were actually seeing one another, past the roles we had played for each other for years. It was an uncomfortable conversation. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the discomfort. Discomfort is where growth happens. I've reached 5,000 subscribers recently because I started sharing these truths. And I want you to know that your support matters. If this resonates with you, please leave a comment. I read everyone. It's it's hard to change the way people see you, but it's even harder to change how you see yourself. I realized that night that I had been hiding behind my own good guy persona. It was a shield, but it was also a prison. By stepping out of it, I wasn't just defending myself against an arrogant guy at a party. I was finally stepping into the life I deserved. It wasn't about being mean or aggressive. It was about being firm. There is a deep, quiet power in knowing exactly who you are, especially when other people are trying to tell you who you should be. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to own it, as you just have to be the most honest one, especially with yourself. When we walked back into the house, the atmosphere had completely changed. People were looking at us, and for the first time, I didn't shrink away from it. I held my head high, not with arrogance, but with a quiet, grounded confidence that felt entirely natural. It's funny how the world shifts when you stop begging for its approval. You start to see people for who they really are, and they finally start to see you for who you are, too. It's a simple shift, but it changes everything. If you've ever felt like your voice wasn't being heard or like your kindness was being taken for granted, know that the power to change that dynamic is entirely in your hands. It starts with a single moment of clarity. It starts when you decide that you are no longer willing to sacrifice your dignity just to keep someone else comfortable. And honestly, that realization is worth more than any approval you'll ever get from a room full of people who don't really care about who you are. Thank you for listening to my story today. It wasn't easy to put into words, but I think it was the most important thing I've ever had to say. If you found any value in this, please hit that like button and share your own experiences in the comments. I truly do read every single one. Take care of yourselves, stay true to who you are, and don't be afraid to demand the respect you've earned. I'll see you in the next one.